Hey class, welcome to week 10. Okay, hopefully you folks are still with me. I've seen some signs of life up on Canvas, all right, which is what we're operating from right now. And I want to, before I get into this week's lesson and start talking about that, just want to make sure you folks are navigating this properly and being able to get the stuff you need to. Okay, so make sure you read the announcement, the Theater 5 redirect up here, so you folks know that we're doing things a little bit differently because we can't meet anymore. And there's a lot of things we can't do, but there are definitely some things we can. Okay. And then week 9 was on writing, and there's a writing project I wanted you folks to do. Hopefully you folks have done that. I haven't seen any submissions yet, but I hope you folks do. The idea being that once you folks actually have written a short script, you've gone through my script lecture and looked at how to format things. There's a lot of material there to actually go through. So if you dive into it, you can be busy for a little while. Once you write that script, we're going to be using that later on in the class in order to shoot something. Okay, there are a few different ways we can do it, and I'll talk about that more a little bit later. Okay, but I want to make sure you folks do that, and then make sure you turn in a script to the Dropbox when you're finished. Okay, so I've how to write a script, and then also how to break down a script. So I've got a script breakdown Dropbox as well. So once you've written the script, then you can break it down, and then we can start figuring out how to shoot those sorts of things. Okay, so make sure you do that. That was week 9. And of course, last week we were gone because we had spring break. So this week we're on week 10. Now, right now, our recording sound and shooting dialogue page is kind of empty. I'm still building it. This is going to be part of that page, okay? But I do have some notes up there. It's only 2 pages, but it's talking about how to record sound, why sound is important, that sort of thing. And then I'm going to go through that lecture right now, which is going to become part of that. And then I'm also going to be recording another video, which is going to be covering some of the stuff we've done with regards to shooting scenes with dialogue. And we'll go back and look at that 8 Mile footage that we shot before and talk about why we shot it that way. Okay? So let me get into the lecture real quick. Okay, I want to talk about that. Probably better you folks hear it from me than just having to read it. So, sound. Why is sound important? Especially if you're going to be having sound in your film, you want to make sure you do it the right way. One thing is crummy audio equals a crummy film, at least in the opinion of people who are going to be viewing it. They're not going to cut you some slack if other parts of it are good. They're going to be looking for whatever they can nitpick, and very often bad sound is going to be something that people end up fixating on. So types of audio you're likely to have in your piece, and these are the components you should have in any video that you make. Dialogue, so all your on-screen speech. You need to make sure it's audible, and it needs to be intelligible as well. So you want to make sure if a character is delivering an important line, you can hear it, you can understand it, the audience can as well. Okay, you don't want a car honking over the top of it or something like that, or wind noise that ends up burying it. I can give you a million examples of that, and it just doesn't turn out well. And it's something that people notice. It's like, oh, yeah, that piece would have been good, except for the audio. All that wind noise, yeah, it just ruined it. You want to make sure that your dialogue in particular is good and well recorded. Sound effects. So these are the sounds that make that things make. They can be muted or distinct for emphasis. They can be recorded on location or found on sound FX discs. Or as I like to do, I like to go out and with digital microphone and record them separately, which is called Foleying. And if you're going to Foley, you can do it in a studio setting, or you can also do it on a location setting. It's the best way to get really, really good sounds is actually to take the time to go out and record them. But if you can't, then sound effects discs very often will give you some very cool sounds as well, very professional sounds. Sometimes it's like the same scream, what they call, I think it's the Wilhelm scream, that gets used again and again and again. I think there's also like one particular prostitute that shows up on sound effects discs as well. There's also a hot dog cart being run over by a truck, which is really good if you want to have like a ship crashing into an iceberg or something like that. those are out there. Good sounds. A lot of times you can get this stuff free on the internet too. Next we have ambience, which is the sound of a place, a room, a meadow, and it's essential for seamless editing of dialogue. And I can't stress how important ambience can actually be, because if you are cutting from one shot of a person to a shot of another person, when you have that cut between those two, there's going to be an audible gap in sound. And where one meets the other, you're going to have that kind of and that ambience is designed in order to cover over that gap. And it's really simple. All you do is you record your character's dialogue, and then before you leave, you record the sound of the room. And once you have that room tone, you can loop that as long as you want. It used to be where we had to record 30 seconds to a minute. Now you only really need 10 seconds, and then you can just kind of loop that. But it's always good to have more. And you always want to have ambience underneath all of your other sound effects. So you've got your dialogue up here, then sound effects. You always want to have ambience in there too. And it just is going to give you a much richer sound. And it will also help cover up any other glitches you might have when you're recording your dialogue or your sound effects. Then you have music and narration. And this stuff is always recorded later in a studio setting or found elsewhere. And I say always, I don't necessarily mean always, but it's 99.9% of the time you're going to be going back into the studio or someplace else and recording your narration. You want that controlled environment that you're doing it in. And the same thing with music. You're either going to use something pre-recorded or you're going to have somebody record it for you. It's very rare where you just have a person, all right, come on, actors move out of the way, now the person's going to play the music. It does happen occasionally if we want that really live sound, but you're going to want controlled settings, so save that stuff for later. Go into a studio and record that stuff. But dialogue, sound effects, ambience, and music and narration, these are what are going to make up the soundtrack of your piece, okay? You're going to have all these things, if possible. If you're using a really limited editing system, then you might run into some problems. But normally, this is the bare minimum of what you're going to have. Very often, if I'm doing a larger project, I will run out of tracks. I will, if it has 8 tracks before you have to start mixing down, it's like, oh shit, I need like 12 because I've got several layers of ambience going on here, and then I'm checkerboarding my audio as well. Most of this discussion is more appropriate for an editing class, but just so you know that you're going to have a lot of audio, a good, rich audio palette is better for your film than having something that's just way too stripped down and has gaps that people can hear. Next, we want to talk about how to record audio. And at this point in the class, we'd be going out in the field. I'd be giving you folks Tascams and a variety of microphones, and you folks would be recording that, learning how to use a boom and things like that. I'm going to talk about it. I'll show you folks some diagrams. Maybe I'll record myself using microphones. I can actually do that right here in my studio, which is really just one of our spare bedrooms. Or our one spare bedroom. Normally it's the cat room, but the cat isn't here right now. So I'll get into that. But right now we'll just talk about in abstract ways to record audio. So one way to do this is you can use the on-camera microphone, and your audio will sound like crap. It really will not sound good. The only case I ever knew where somebody was using their on-camera microphone and it sounded good was a group of students I had when I first started teaching, and I asked them, how did you guys get such good good audio? And they said it's because we put the camera really, really close to the actors. It's like, well, that's one way to do it. But most of the time, the on-camera microphone is just, it's there, okay, but it's not really designed to be used heavily, and it's just not going to be very good, okay? Now, it can be okay for ambience and effects in some cases. A project I was working on a few years ago, we were doing a lot of gunshots, and I found that there was, anytime anyone fired a gun, the on-camera microphone a limiter would compress the sound, and it made it sound really cool. Obviously, I threw away all the dialogue and everything else that came off of the on-camera, the onboard microphone, but the gunshots sounded really good, so I used those. So it can be used for certain things, but you don't want to use it for dialogue. And one of the reasons is the wind noise will be really bad because you have this on-camera microphone that is really just kind of built into the chassis of it, and it's totally exposed to the wind, and you're going to end up with really, really bad wind noise. So just bear that in mind. That's something you're going to you want to get rid of anyway, is the wind noise. So another way to do it is to use a better microphone. Go for it. Use a better microphone. So if you get the microphone as close to the subject as possible without getting it in the frame, that's the goal. And now how you do that, it doesn't really matter. That could be, you could have the microphone mounted onto the camera, okay, but you're relatively close. That can work, okay? As long as you're using a better microphone, you can actually put some sort of foam cover or a dead cat or something on it in order to keep the wind from getting to it. That's going to be a big part of it. Higher quality microphone has higher quality sound anyway. But if you want to go the next distance and get the microphone even closer, then you're going to want to use a boom to get it really, really close to the person's mouth. Or you could also use a clip-on microphone like they use on talk shows. Sometimes they'll use both. Very often I will too. It's kind of like wearing a belt and suspenders at the same time, but you can never be too safe when it comes to recording your audio. Okay. And if you use a lavalier mic, you can hide it in the subject's clothes. That can be really handy if you're using a wireless microphone. You just tuck the receiver in their back pocket, hide it, and make sure they wear something dark. If they're wearing a white t-shirt or a white dress, then it's going to be a problem anyway. But if they're wearing dark clothes, you can usually hide it in their collar someplace. Okay. You do have to be careful of men with beards, though, because their beards will scrape that lavalier microphone. So just bear that in mind. The other thing you can do is you can dub it all in later. Okay. And in some cases, you might need to do it. If you watch older movies from the 60s and 70s, you'll see films where it looks like everything was dubbed in. And if it's consistent, then you get used to it. But if it's uneven, then that becomes a problem. So the audio is very clean sounding if you dub it in later, and that might not match the rest of the audio you already have, which is going to have those extra artifacts from being recorded outside. Getting it synced up can be difficult, but it's not impossible. And then getting the ambience to match can be really difficult. So there may be times where you watch a movie and someone's talking and then all of a sudden their voice sounds weird. It's like, oh, that must have been some ADR they dropped in and they didn't get the ambience to match. I've had some films I've worked on where I just couldn't get this line I wanted, so I just decided I'd do it in ADR, and it was absolutely impossible for me to get the ambience to match, and it was just embarrassing. It was just, I recorded it indoors, it was supposed to be outdoors, and it was just awful. But it was all I had at the time. There was another time, and this one was like a best case scenario of where you actually have to do ADR. Our microphone cable died on us, and we didn't realize that half of the audio we recorded one night just didn't come through at all. And so we were in the same location the next night. So I had everybody else just sit off to the side, and I had my actors go through the same lines they did before in the same location. And considering the fact that I already made them do like 5 takes of everything before, they were warmed up, they knew how to hit their marks and everything, and it was the easiest audio to dub in that I've ever had to work with. And especially if you're cutting back and forth with people, if you start going out of sync, you can cut to a reaction shot. No one ever knew that whole scene was done with ADR, except for me and the actors. Okay? So that's a possibility. And sometimes doing ADR, replacing stuff later on, is the only way to do it. And if you're doing animation or something like that, that's the way they do all of the audio. You ADR that stuff. When we get into stop motion and animation, we may talk about how you do your audio for that at that point too. Okay. So this is a very brief lecture, just how to do audio right, why you want to do audio right. I'll have some more content which will actually show you some of the techniques you use to get good audio. Okay, and I will even show you a video of me and how I record things in this studio, which will help you see why my audio is actually good. If I were just using the camera mic or using the laptop mic, it'd be garbage. So there you go. So I want you folks to notice I've just switched lenses, okay? And That's important. I normally don't use this lens to shoot when I do my lectures because of the fact that you can see all the shit in this room that I don't necessarily want you to see. Okay, and but what I want you to notice right now is that from the point of view that you would normally see me, normally I'm shooting myself with a 25 millimeter lens. Now I'm shooting with the 12, and you can see everything. So when it's a tighter shot, I've got shallower depth of field, but more importantly, you can't see the microphones. So notice I have one microphone right here. This is my Yeti microphone, which is going directly into my computer, and it sounds like totally awesome. Sounds like a DJ mic or something like that. And then right here, I have my Octava, which is the one I have running into my Blackmagic over here, and I have audio coming from both of those. I can choose between the two. I can blend the two of them if I want to as well, but I always make sure I have two of them. And notice how close they are to my mouth. Obviously, with this wide angle of view, you can see both of them, which is not something you normally want. But I'm showing you so you folks can see that when you normally are seeing me and I'm shooting myself with a 25 millimeter, these are right here in order to get the best possible audio. Okay. I don't have a boom person or anything like that. My lavalier microphone was by Radio Shack and it died a few years ago. So these are the mics I'm using. They give me the sound that I want. And that's the best way to get good audio. Not only having it close to the person's mouth, but also making sure you have some level of redundancy in case this mic stops working because this is an old Soviet piece of tin, or this one because it's like too high tech. Either one of these could die. I have a backup just in case. That's how you record good audio.